Our next presenter has an extensive background incorporating diversity, inclusion, and community outreach in Oklahoma and abroad. She incorporates diversity and inclusion in all the work in which she is involved. Elizabeth Larios is the executive director of the Southwest 29th Street District Association, a project manager for the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City, and co-founder of Rehoboth Care Mission. Ms. Larios is determined to highlight and elevate her Hispanic community's challenges and opportunities while continuing to advocate for a better, more equitable world for all. In Oklahoma City, she manages various economic development projects such as single-family residential developments in Northeast Oklahoma City, area-wide city planning efforts known as master plans throughout the city, and manages the Southwest 29th Street commercial corridor that runs about 3 miles between South May Avenue to South Shields Boulevard in South Oklahoma City that involves more than 300 businesses. Internationally, she assists Ghanaian women entrepreneurs with seed funding for their dream businesses to become reality. She helps them become self-sustaining while also boosting their local economy through job creation and monetary circulation. Ms. Larios holds a master in public administration and a bachelor in international business from the University of Central Oklahoma. While at UCO and at Rose State College, where she earned a business administration associate's, she was in various leadership positions and programs. Please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Larios.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to be back here. I graduated from UCO, and so it's so good to be back home. I really thank you guys all for taking the time out of your very busy days to come and check all of us out and see what we have to say. Just a little bit about me, as if you didn't hear a lot already through that awesome bio, so thank you very much. I want to talk about equity, but through inclusion, and in my own personal story, how inclusion has impacted my life and how it's looked for me. So this is twofold, both for perhaps some students that are in the audience, as to knowing maybe how you can incorporate this perhaps into your life, as well as people who are in the professional field practicing it and maybe needing some ideas as to how to incorporate equity and inclusion into your professional lives, or maybe putting it into your companies. And so a little bit about me. In order to understand me and all the things that I bring to a table when I am present there, we have to very much understand our intersectionalities. And so for me, that includes, I was born in California in South Central Los Angeles. I was born to two Mexican immigrant parents. We were raised evangelical Christians. I'm a cis female. I'm in that millennial category. You either love us or you hate us. And I am Hispanic, Mexican. I just came back from, both my parents live in Mexico, so I oftentimes have to go back and visit them and enjoy those moments in my life for sure. And grew up low to middle income, didn't really understand what that meant at all until, of course, growing up, and then you kind of see some different privileges or lack thereof. And so for me, I grew up dyslexic, but I didn't know that until later on in high school. There was a teacher who kind of identified that and did some testing, and we found that out, and lo and behold, that was the reason I hated to read. And so there was just so many different things that, of course, compose me and who I am. And so fast forward to growing up into high school. So in high school, for us, because we were low income, we couldn't necessarily do sports because you have to pay for your shoes or your uniforms or all of that type of stuff. And so for me, I did clubs and organizations, and that really substituted all of that. So oftentimes that's sports is what gives people scholarships. And so for me, those clubs and organizations really helped me go into college. And so for me, those moments of when a teacher would encourage me to do speech or debate or something like that, that was really them kind of bringing me into this new world of, oh, okay, great, I'm going to do something. I'm going to value myself in a very different way. And so later on in college, was involved in lots of leadership programs. And so within those leadership programs, those were really opportunities where mentors really brought us into different circles. We got to meet a lot of leadership people in senators, people in leadership, and we got to have discussions. And then, of course, we had etiquette classes. We had so many different opportunities while I was in college. There were these moments where people would bring us in as students, bring us into different conversations. And then, of course, for me, what really broke the who you know barrier for my career was these work-study programs. So they really allowed for me to enter into a professional career and have this background of experience when I did work study. So both with the school and then was able to do some internships outside of school as well. And then just talking about my career progression, there was definitely some moments where these moments of inclusion really became apparent through mentorship inside of my work. And so, for example, when I was at Express Employment Professionals, which I saw were one of the sponsors of today, so thank you for making today possible. Whenever I worked there, there was a woman by the name of Veronica Zamora, and she was an amazing mentor, and she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so she really helped me and brought me into this professional world that then it really opened my eyes and it exposed me to so many different things that I hadn't seen. And so she very quickly put me up the ladder, and I eventually became a salesperson with them and learned so much throughout that time. And then I worked at the YWCA. During that time, I saw so many systems of inequality and broken justice systems, and so I started to run for political office. And so I ran for political office in 2016, and that was such a great experience, learned so much. And while I was doing that, this exposure and this recognition began to just rise. And so during that time, there were so many moments where people were trying to bring me into different conversations or different things, because both I stepped out of my comfort zone and really wanted to engage community members, but as well as they were bringing me into conversations, whether it be because I was Hispanic or because I was running for office. And so later on, during this time here, kind of all went together, but I started doing community outreach and recruitment with Rose State College. And during that time, there were people at the city planning department who had reached out to me because they wanted to include me in these conversations about how they can engage the Hispanic community. And it was at that moment where they kind of reached down and reached over and brought me into these conversations that before I wasn't necessarily a part of, and I didn't know that people wanted to hear our voice as the Hispanic community or as me as a young person. Whatever you saw the circles that I fall into, whatever out of all of that they wanted to hear about, they wanted to bring me into those conversations. And so I'm very thankful for both the city planner and the person in the arts department who brought me in to kind of pick my brain and created this committee to kind of talk about different things in a very different way, and really wanting to know personal ideas. And so at that moment, I then kind of reevaluated my career, and I really liked what they were doing. I was never exposed to city planning or any of that type of stuff. And so I just remember Googling economic development in Oklahoma City, because at the time I was already doing economic development internationally. I always knew I wanted to do a nonprofit and help women set up businesses. And I had great connections with some people from my church. And so we were already doing that internationally, but locally I wanted to know how to do that as well. And so I reached out to the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City. And for me, that was a moment of when they hired me. They took a chance on me. They were actually, I had no background in this, but they included me in this type of stuff. And at that point, my world just completely opened. Really started talking about developers and what that looks like in city planning and how all these things work together and how the city works and streetscape improvements and all of these things that I had no idea existed. But it wasn't until, again, somebody reached out and they were able to include me in these conversations, whether it be because somebody formed some type of committee and they needed a Hispanic person to kind of give their input, or because they needed my demographic. For me, these diversity initiatives, they've worked out. For me, education got me to the place where I was able to be at certain tables. And so the only thing that I think I wish would have happened is that I wish I would have been exposed to more earlier on, because if I would have known that the world of development, economic development, and kind of how it worked locally, perhaps maybe I would have started to be a developer or something like that. And so you just never know. And so I encourage you guys as students to really kind of go out there, and if you hear of something that you're interested in, really go explore it, go talk to them. And then people who are employers, if you have an opportunity to go to a career day at a high school, please do so, because there are so many people who have no idea of all of the different type of careers that are out there, and having representation at those tables, in those careers, in those conference rooms, I promise it will make a difference. And so now, because for me, there's been people who have included me, who have brought me in, I've been able to really do that with a lot of those city planning and the projects that it is that we do. So for example, these master plans that we work on, community engagement portion of that is really fun and exciting to me, but that's because I know where to go, right? So I can go to these places and I can say, hey, we need your input, because oftentimes just putting out a flyer or something saying, hey, we need your input, it doesn't necessarily happen. For some communities, you actually have to go into the community and sometimes go to their doors and ask for their input. And then once you have that input, what can you do with that information? And so all of that is things that I now get to practice. But again, it happens because of my background. And so all this to say that if you have an opportunity to be included in something, if somebody asks you, I know that sometimes it's really hard to step out and say yes and take time out of your day to, answer a survey or be part of a focus group. I encourage you to do so, because your background and your knowledge can be really useful and really helpful. And then as for the employers or people who are out there, I encourage you to take community engagement and community outreach really seriously, because there's so many voices that have never been asked. And once they're asked, you can spark something that is absolutely amazing and life-changing. And so for me, this was my first day of work at the Alliance for Economic Development. Since that day, I had no idea I would be doing all of these really cool things, but it's because of those moments of inclusion that really brought me to these places where now I'm more knowledgeable, and I believe that there's generational knowledge that comes from that. And because of that, I'm able to include my community in a part of that. And so it's these big bubbles that are happening, right? And so once we're included, we can really make an impact in our community, and then of course start changing things from there. And so if you've not listened to anything, I encourage you to listen now. So what I believe is that inclusion produces exposure. And once you're exposed, I believe that can produce opportunity. And once you have that opportunity, if you so choose to do something with that opportunity, at that point in time, you can represent your community, you can represent all of those things that you are, all of that background that you have, all of the things that represent who you are. And when you step into a room, you can speak on what you know. You don't have to be an expert in the thing that they're asking you about. You have to be an expert in all of the things of your community, of your house, of your household, of your income, all of that. You can speak on that. And so once you do, then at that point in time, you are representing. And once you're representing, you can be a voice, a bigger voice for all of your people, all of your background, all of your community. And when we have more voices at the table, when we have great representation at the table, at that point in time, we can start brainstorming equity together, because equity looks very different for different things and different people. But it's not until you have a really good group of people really being honest with each other and brainstorming and feeling comfortable with each other, at that point in time, we can really start talking about equity for the specific problem. Thank you guys so much.